Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Unschooled. You are here with myself, Mandy Elam, and the lovely Lexi. How are you today, Lex?
I am so excited to be here on this beautiful, another sunny day. It's been sunny every time we've gotten together. So the energy is just flowing.
Beautiful. I would love for you to introduce our incredible guest today.
I am so excited that we have with us today the amazing, talented, inspirational Leslie Lyon, who is a badass mom and entrepreneur and spiritual goddess. She is just this amazing human that I am so excited. I'll let you share about you, Leslie.
Thank you. What a sweet intro. So I own numerous businesses and I really am very, very entrepreneurial, so much so that I often have to rein myself in and not start another one. But at the moment, I'm working 4 businesses. I have 5 children, 2 of which are at home, and I'm almost done with that day-to-day parenting thing. So I'm really looking forward to that all adult children season. And probably my most heart forward part of my entrepreneurship is my coaching and the spiritual side. But every single business I have adds to my skill set and to what I bring to the table. So I love them all for each individual things. In some ways, I do view them a little bit like children. So it's been just like birthing after birthing after birthing. It's really, I'm very much that mother energy.
I love that. They are like little babies. Like when you give birth to a business, it gets its own little social security number and everything. It has its own little soul. And I just love Leslie's just an incredible person I've been following for a long time now. And we'll get into lots of parts of your story. But another part of you and aspect is just your divine feminine goddessness and how you work with that and your sacred sexuality. And so it's really cool to see like you are just like such a womb master. And if you're not giving birth to like an actual soul and human, you're giving birth to these amazing projects and creations and studying and observing their own, how each of their own little souls are. And I just think that's just so badass. And I honor you for choosing that path and taking a look at those things for yourself and for us.
Thank you. I have learned so much about motherhood just from my entrepreneurship and from recognizing different programming. So I'm very, very good at the programming side of life in general, spirituality, and in business, and recognizing how the programs can either run and interfere or how you can run them. So.
Yeah, and so you've recently on Instagram been sharing such intimate, really getting vulnerable and sharing your story, and that has had me hooked. That has been like an on the edge of your seat, just amazing experience that you've been sharing. And I love the format that you've been doing it in. It's so unique. It's just these great little series of her story and her journey and the way she goes about it. It's so inspiring. So I love what you're doing with this. So I don't know if you want to share any of that, because I feel like there's a lot of people that, are kind of going through similar things or have experienced it, or that could resonate with your journey.
For sure. Yeah. So I knew from the moment that I left my conservative life and I was a Christian and I had homeschooled all of my kids, and I was that submissive wife that the Bible talks about. And I was like an overachiever in all ways, and I was going to nail all of that. And then I had some traumatic events happen in my marriage that kind of just smacked me in the face and was trying to show aspects of myself that I had hidden. And I just kept tucking them away and getting smacked in the face. And then at one point it was kind of like, okay, there is no more smacking in the face. I'm ready to look in this mirror and I'm ready to confront what I haven't been able to look at. And I knew from that moment on that I would tell my story publicly, but I also knew it would be at a later date. I naturally assumed it would be in book format because I am a natural gifted writer, and I do have a couple of books going. But this is super funny. I haven't told this part of the story, so you'll enjoy this. I've wanted dreadlocks for probably 20 years. And of course, that was not like acceptable in a very conservative situation.
What? It wasn't.
I know, so weird. So I had never gone and gotten them. And then this last year, I was like, it's time. I'm going to go get them. So I had to travel because it's a pretty unique thing. And so I went to get them and I'm driving home. And as I'm driving home, my higher self is like, okay, it's time to go public. And I was like, are you sure? And she's like, yes. And because I had such a high conflict divorce and my ex-husband is still very, very conservative, I had planned to wait until my youngest was 18 to go public with that, to avoid any court cases or any more BS, because I don't need any more drama in my life. And so when my higher self is like, it's time to go public, I was like, with all of it? And they're like, yeah, all of it. And I was like, okay, well, I have a book going. I'll just work on that a little bit more. And they're like, oh, no. You're going to go public video. You're just going to share it and put it out there. And this is going to open a door for you that you don't even know yet. And I'm like, all right. So I went home and I started the series, and I've just like, obviously I'm 5 years out from that initial point of, I'm no longer going to get smacked in the face by this. I'm going to start dodging some of these. And so when I started the story, I was like, okay, because my perspective, of course, I have a lot more terminology. I have a lot more understanding. I've gotten, most of my psychology degree done. So I really understand the integral part of what was happening in those moments. And so it's like being able to tell it from this really grand perspective now. And I'm like, oh, I see it. Yeah, I was ready. And I just was like holding off for that 18 moment to really feel more free about it. But something about always doing whatever my higher self is guiding me toward, really stepping into that discomfort for me. I am so comfortable in discomfort that sometimes when I'm not in discomfort, I'm like, oh, this feels weird.
Mm-hmm. Adjusting to peace. That's a whole chapter for people that have been through a lot. That's a thing.
It is, for sure. And, like discomfort brings a lot of breakthroughs. And so I've never avoided them, while simultaneously realizing that a lot of the spiritual community can get stuck in shadow work. So I don't advocate for that. Like, shadow work comes on its own. You don't really have to do that. When you're stepping into the highest form of yourself, and this is something that I work with on my coaching clients, is what is the highest version of you that you can see right now? And what does it look like for you to step into that? Because the second you step into it, you see another higher version of yourself. So it's just like this never ending game. And it's not filled with pressure like a lot of us feel. Like, it doesn't mean it's comfortable, but it doesn't have to be super pressure filled either, because my highest form likes to get down. She likes to have a good time. She's not about this work grind, push yourself thing that I sometimes fall into. Mm-hmm. And so stepping into that for me is always just filled with such magic, because I never know what's going to come. And then being able to realize that next version of myself is glorious. So the plot of my life has always been really realizing that since a very small age, I've been conditioned to give up my own personal power. Mm-hmm. And every time I agreed to give it up, I put more chains on myself that made it harder to break free. And so very much when I was still in that situation, the only thing I could visualize was a phoenix rising from the ashes. So that therefore meant that I literally manifested burning my entire life down. I did not realize that until later. And now Leslie would not have had to burn it down in order to come out of that. But Leslie then didn't know that. And that's where the grace for that was my highest form then. And it did need to burn. And it is okay that Leslie then needed to burn it down. Leslie now doesn't need to burn anything down, because her knowing and her power is so solid that I can just look and go, okay, this is for me, I do it. This is not for me, I don't do it. My fuck yeses are really plain. They're really direct. And if it's not a fuck yes, it ain't happening. If it's just a maybe, not doing it. So for me, that meant burning my whole life down, and it was very messy, and it also scarred and burned my children and my ex-husband and a lot of people whom I loved. And in that moment, I was just trying to figure out which way was up for me. And that's the messy part, is when you for your whole life have given up your personal power, when you start to choose yourself, you feel like a selfish wench. And it's kind of counterintuitive at first, and there's just a lot of unintegration internally. So you tend to be a little bit wishy-washy, and this is where your manifestation time becomes real long, because you're not solid in who you are yet. So back then there was a lot of wee, and like I didn't know which way was up, and I felt a lot of mom guilt and a lot of things, and all of that, as I've stepped fully into my power, has really fallen away, and my manifestation time is almost zero. And that's where you really become this powerful creator, where you have an idea, and if you're a fuck yes, it happens. And you start to recognize when it's not a fuck yes, and things kind of morph into something you didn't plan on, and you start seeing your patterns, and you start being able to influence it to those positively polarized timelines. And that has been like the 5-year journey for me of really repeating my programming in a negatively polarized timeline, and just making these micro movements, which look like boundaries, and shifting my life to a positively polarized timeline. And at first it feels really foreign, because there's so much goodness there, and you don't necessarily feel worthy of it. But oh my God, when you get there and you start to feel the self-love, that no one can love you like you can love yourself. And that place is pure magic. And everything about the universe has been waiting for you to recognize yourself in the mirror, so that it can mirror back to you even more.
That's like a mic drop moment. That's just so beautiful. And like that Unschooled, that was like our whole thing behind it, was like realizing those conditionings, right? And breaking them down, and recognizing that we're allowed to step into our power. We're allowed to create our, accept our gifts and be proud. And all of this, just the experience is all unique to each one of us. And I have to say, I see this connection. Now, for me, I see dreads as the history of them with, what is it? In Jamaica. They wear them, and they believe that they hold in your energy. So they believe when you start the dreads, it's like this spiritual, it's when you're in this spiritual alignment of your own power, and that it holds in your power. And so it's also, it was like the 7 dreads for the seven, I don't know. There's some really cool history behind it though. But all I can see is you standing in your power, and this, with your dreads, you're really owning it. And hello, we got somebody that came in the back door. That preached.
Hi, Mila. I love that. And even like Dolly Parton says, the higher the hair, the closer to heaven. And there's so many like indigenous cultures and native cultures that give such credit to our hair and it being able to be an extension. So I just think that's so divine that you literally got an extension and then got a message right in all that time.
Yep. And my life has always been that way. All these little crazy synchronicities lining up. And the woman that I chose to do my dreads, she calls it dreads with intention. And I was like, we vibed so hard while she was doing my dreads. And like, it's been such a magical experience. And so like, it's just funny because it's such a simple thing. And yet it just led to this next beautiful moment for me. And I feel like my life is like that. Like just one step leads to the next beautiful moment. And I just get to enjoy it over and over.
One big moving prayer.
Yes, for sure.
I just thank you so much for, we're going to go deeper, obviously, but for everything that you shared with us, because that truly is what I've found within my own self. And it's this sacred alchemy that we do. And it comes from building so much trust and so much love and being devoted to ourselves and trusting to make decisions based on what our heart wants most and not what other people think or might think, and trusting that that's for the highest good. And like you said, this is where we have the opportunity to give ourselves grace in the past, because we're all merely just humans and we're doing the best that we can in each moment to start to honor ourselves. And it can look a little messy and a little ugly at first. And I love, like you were talking about, how shadow work just comes naturally. And I love that. I'm like, I guess like a shadow work kind of coach person too, but I don't have to like, say that, because it happens naturally for people as you're walking along your path. It's because most of the time there's some shit going on in your life, or you're sick of your own shit, and you want to start to shift your perception and your perspective, and you want to show up differently and you start to take radical responsibility. And then the shadow work starts to come in, and it's these things, these, it can be a habit, it can be an experience, a memory, it can be these things that sometimes hold us back. But I think a lot of the times when we finally face that shadow, it's like you get to see the light at the end of the tunnel and you've got something to work towards now. And it's not really that scary. It sounds really scary, but what's really the scary part is hiding from it this whole time.
It's so true. Like, as I started to unbox my suppressed memories and this version of myself that I didn't even know existed, at first I was, my inner child was terrified for me, feeling like I couldn't handle it and like it would be too much for me. And it was such, like, having been a mom of so many children, like I just saw her so plainly and with so much love. It was so easy for me to say, like, I got you, girl, you're good. You can cry it out. We're good. We're going to look at this now. Like, we're ready to look at it. And, I've always been really thankful for how I'm wired. I was literally wired to persevere. Like, I know and believe that I chose these difficult potentials because all the things that happened to me, there was a lot of outside free will choices that did usurp my sovereignty. But I choose to believe, and I also take this with a grain of salt, so I'm going to say this. I also chose to believe in the past that the Christian church was the correct teaching. So now I choose to believe that I knew about these potentials and I chose these potentials while simultaneously accepting that this is the version of me that understands it now. And my awareness is going to grow, and I'm going to leave room for that. And I'm not going to say this is a hard line, but for right now, this helps me feel more powerful and helps me accept that other outside people came in and usurped my sovereignty. And there was consent violations and there was things that hurt me as a human, but I was aware of them before I came. And, having the ability to talk with people who have crossed over has been really beneficial for me in that process because I can resolve things with people who are dead. Not everyone can do that. And that's okay. I'm very thankful for how I'm wired, because even in those moments where I had to look at these very difficult things that had taken my sovereignty, I was so filled with love and compassion for myself and for being able to understand and look at this element of myself that it didn't trigger what it does for some people, which is like a downward spiral into unworthiness. Like, that happened to me because I'm unworthy. No, that did not happen to me because I'm unworthy. That should not have happened to me, but it did. And I get to choose my response to it. And for whatever reason, the way that I structured that choice and the way that I structured coming and looking actually full in my mirror of what happened, I was filled with so much understanding for the choices I had made after that I was like, oh my God, girl, you make so much sense now to me. I see you and I know why you did what you did. And I understand why you chose that 21 mirror marriage to show you that aspect of yourself. And then it was less about, why did you stay so long? Why did you tolerate the abuse? Why didn't you get help sooner? Why didn't you tell someone? And then it became about, I get you. And it's okay. And I love you. And now we're going to work on the wounds that those things created. And we're going to just be with it. And we're just going to feel it. And there were moments when I wanted to crawl out of my fucking skin. I didn't want to feel it. And in those moments, I would try and, we have all of our tools in our tool belt that we try, and some of them would work really great and some of them were shit. And some of them I would come back to, and some of them are like, I'm never doing that again. And so we try all these things and we tap into all these different healers. But ultimately what I came back to is that I have a group of solid people who love me as I am. I love me as I am, and I came here to do a great work, and I'm just going to keep doing it. And some days I can get up and nail it and do all the things, and some days I can't. And I just own that, and I've structured my life in a way to make space for that. And I'm just filled with so much gratitude that I was finally able to stand looking in the mirror fully and see myself, that it just brought me so much inner healing and freedom to accept myself just as I am.
That is so beautiful and so inspirational. I am like in tears and chills listening to you speak about it. It's just amazing. I'm so grateful you're sharing this because I feel like this is something that people keep within. You know what I mean? It's so scary to get vulnerable and to share those parts of you and those aspects and admit those things. And it gets easier the more you do it, and you're doing it with grace, and you're showing how it can be done with grace, and you're showing how it is worth the work, you know? Nothing good comes easy, I always say. And it's, you know, there's blessings in those lessons, and it just takes time in the right mindset.
For sure. And everybody has a different purpose here. Like someone who chooses not to be as public about their own trauma or their own experiences, that's their process for them, and they have to honor it. I've always been very public, and when I go out in public, people naturally share their deep traumas with me, and it's been that way forever. And I thought that was normal. And until I started, being in larger groups and people being like, why do people tell you those things? And I'm like, it just has always been that way. And so for me, I just know that's what I'm here for, and that's who I am. And, I'm sure that there are elements of people who are in my close circle that might challenge a little bit, because I am so very public with my process. I try really hard to respect everyone else's sovereignty in that. Like, as I'm telling the in-depth things of my story, it is very important to me not to usurp my children's process with their dad and to not air their dirty laundry. They are my children. And so a part of their story is interwoven in my story. So by being public, they are affected by that. They are very loving and accepting of who I am at my core. And we as a family have done a lot of work in the area of everybody being an individual and choosing their own process in that. At the same time, there have been times when one of the kids needs to say to me that I love your freedom and I love what you're doing, but this is affecting me. And it gives me the opportunity to adjust and honor them in another way. So I try and leave that avenue open while at the same time being true to myself. So it's this flowy balance for all of us.
The dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say that, Mandy. It's a dance.
That's the cool thing about life in Earth School and us coming in as these wild humans that we are right now, is there's always another moment to fix it, to find more grace, to try a different tool that might work for you, that might support you in plugging yourself back in.
Totally. 100%.
You are so juicy. What were you going to say?
Well, something that keeps popping up for me that I feel like we're supposed to pop into, and we can take it where we want from here, is that a lot of my sovereignty was stolen by men. And I really want to touch on this because it was something that I really, I had to look at, because I have 4 sons. And I had a lot of frustration and anger at the way our society is structured and the things that had happened to me. And all of those things kind of came like square in my face as I have these 4 young men that I'm raising and finishing. And they had some frustration about what I tolerated in the marriage. And they, as the adults, they're asking questions about, how do I show up as a man with this as my example? And I don't want to repeat the mistakes. They respect him in some regards, and then they have questions on the other side. And for me, in that process of healing some of the sovereignty and the usurping of my authority that happened, there was a season where I had a lot of anger towards men. And even though I didn't voice it, the 4 men that I love the most could feel it. And it was starting to affect them. And so I knew I had to look at it, and I knew I had to dig into it, and I knew I had to come to a better place with it because of my love for them. And as I dug into that more, this is where the coding of victim and perpetrator come in, and where we naturally choose a channel when we're programmed. And obviously in my story, I talk a lot about choosing a victim stance and coming into this realization that my whole life had coded me to be a victim. But I also later realized that as much as I was coded to be the victim, my ex-husband was coded to be that perpetrator, but he was the same coin, different sides. We were both disempowered. We were both trying to protect ourselves. He was just trying to gain it in a different platform, and it ended up usurping a lot of people that I believe he loves authority. And so as I started to look at that and really question, do I have to be a victim or do I have to be a perpetrator? And I was convinced I didn't need to be either. What does that look like? And that was where I started to really look at the victim and the perpetrator being the same energy and the same disempowerment. And that was where I just realized, like, that channel that a lot of the masculines in our experience have chosen was chosen for them, and they're just doing it naturally, and they can equally as step out of it as much as the victim can, and they can be equally as empowered. And then there's not this feminist movement thing. Like, I don't necessarily believe I'm a feminist, although I believe in the whole goddess movement and feminine power. I believe that we're equals, and I believe energetically the feminine energy leads and the masculine energy can then create there. So if the feminine energy is angry at the masculine, there's going to be some disintegration in what the masculine can create. This is all going on inside, by the way. This doesn't need to be an outside experience. So my anger towards the masculine is not only affecting my 4 sons, but affecting my ability to manifest in the physical. So as I step into a more healthy, less wounded feminine, and I feel safer because I have created boundaries to take care of myself, then my masculine can create much quicker and with much more health, and he's not in his wounded masculine. And this is really what started to heal that element of me that was angry at the masculine, because the feminine creating boundaries allows her to lead energetically. Same with the masculine, but the masculine operates more in the physical creation. So he's going to show up with that, with what he can create. And he's a little bit capped in a partnership, same as an internal. If my feminine stays wounded, my masculine can't create in a healthy environment. So that cycle for me has gotten real quick and real honoring. And anytime I notice that my masculine is starting to settle, my feminine gets fired up and wants to burn him down. And so it's an inner thing. And I just acknowledge that he's tired. He's wanting to settle. He wants to rest. And can he rest with me? Am I pushing too hard? Am I striving? Am I trying to prove something energetically that then he has to show up and do in the physical? And it's the same dance, but it's the honoring of both aspects of myself, which then allowed me to honor the masculines in my life. And one thing that I was really, this is where my entrepreneurship ties in. That first business I started, I was really fucking determined to do it on my own. I was going to use all my own money, all my own savage self. I wasn't going to need any help. And at some point I realized, oh, you're proving yourself, girl. Like, you don't need to do that. You don't have anything to prove here. You stop. Just let it be. Let it be creative. Let it be its flow and all those things. And as soon as I stopped that, it was like this really beautiful moment of all these things coming together. And then with my other 3 businesses, I wanted to partner with people. And I specifically wanted to partner with men. And I wanted to partner with men with high integrity that honored my feminine. And man, have I created the most beautiful partnerships with some of the most divine masculines. And I am loving it. Like, the amount of trust and respect and honor that we have for each other, and the way they recognize what I'm good at and the way I honor what they're good at, like what we're able to create together has been magical. But I had to work through with that first business. I'm doing it by myself. I'm proving myself. And I had to see myself in that arena to really recognize that I was ready for a partnership.
I love that, because it's proof in the pudding that in doing that work for yourself, it benefits your children. It helps heal your children. It helps heal and create that heaven on earth that I think we're all here to do and create. And it's so beautiful because it's just that proof. It's that, it can be done. And that's what happens.
I love how you were talking about, that's even with yesterday, we're recording today on 2/23, but yesterday was 2/2/2/2/2. And I was talking to him just a little bit about even that is exactly what you were talking about, finding the balance between your masculine and feminine within yourself. And I always talk about how your masculine energy, it's your best friend, it's your drive, it's your gumption, it's your push. And your feminine is, like you said, the side of you that says, come on home. We need to nourish, we need to rest, we need to chill out. Like you need these things in order to keep driving as much as possible. And I say often, we as women, especially, we are the motherships. And if anything is imbalanced within us, then everyone else that is energetically attached to us can feel that without saying a word, with just by being. And I love that you spoke about that and highlighted that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I've recognized about myself in the process where I burnt my life to the ground is that when that feminine is fiery like that, like she's frustrated, she doesn't feel honored, she doesn't feel seen and heard. And I've learned how to tame that dragon a little bit because she's fucking awesome. There is nothing she can't do. So I never like want to chain her up. But at the same time, I don't need her burning shit to the ground. And so I've just started to recognize that those are those moments when I need to make micro movements in my boundaries and really honor what she's needing, you know. And I'm an overachiever. I'm very good at what I do. I see and I do, and I'm a master delegator. And all at the same time, I can negate and really fall away from that rest. And that's where bringing in those masculine partnerships for me so I own a virtual assistant sourcing company. And in that business, I chose to partner with one of my great colleagues. His name is Andrew. And for me, he has been such an awesome mirror because I can just bounce ideas off him. We riff really well together. There's a high integrity and respect level. And I can call and I'll say, he'll help me get to the heart of what I'm after. And normally it's, Leslie, you're trying to do too much. You need to bring it down a bit. You need to rest more. What can you delegate more? And I'm really good at delegation. So when he says that, I'm just like, damn, he's right. Because I am such a doer and I can get into that overachieving and not honoring that feminine side of myself. And then there she is burning flames at things that I love.
I love it so much. And that is part of our divine feminine journey. We have these different archetypes. We have these different chapters. We have these different seasons and energies we go through. And sometimes our wild woman does need to burn shit down. And it was sacred at that time. Was it us acting in our highest good? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it was at that time. But either way, there's these beautiful divine things that happen behind it. And there's something sacred about releasing that sacred anger. And then once it's released, then all of a sudden, that's out and we can create a vacuum for peace to come back in. And so I love that you're honest about it and real about it. And there's just parts of the time where we need to do that. One of my favorite teachers, Rebecca Campbell, was talking about writing a whole chapter in her book about the patriarchy and just needing her husband to hold space. And she'd come out from writing and be like, ew, and like, you know, so angry about stuff. And he'd be like, okay. And so, you know, there's so much sacredness to it as well. And it's not always a bad thing. It is a bad thing if we're going to be abusive to others. And it's always important to honor. Like I joke around a lot, but I mean it when I say, like, we all know when we're being an asshole and we all know when we need to make amends for that, or when we're pushing that too far, when we're not honoring ourselves. And first and foremost, being an asshole to ourselves, because that is the easiest way to go in our current matrix, if you will, and style of programming, is to go right to all that inner self guilt, shame, and criticism and fear and let that run amok. So I just love that you decided to interrupt that each and every day as much as you can and show up for it.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it's all really small. And I go back to this all the time. I love Pilates, and Pilates is all about the micro movement, the little muscles, the ones that you're not super aware of, about bringing awareness to it. And like, to me, that's where it's at, like in the shift of energy. Like we can move large amounts of energy, but it's really the micro movements that keeps things flowing, and those yeses and those nos, and what is the most integrous thing in this moment. And if there's a conflict, how do we resolve it in a way that honors everyone, but also brings us closer to a resolution, because I don't want to expend a bunch of energy on unnecessary conflict. So it's just these micro adjustments, these micro movements, these recognizing of where we're at in consciousness and where we want to be, and what does it take to show up like that, and what does it take to see myself in my highest form. What does that look like today? Today it might be staying in bed. Tomorrow it might be mad hustle. Tomorrow might be a combo of both, you know, just honoring that and being able to create a container where you can actually honor that. Like if I had to be in a 9-to-5 job, if somebody was telling me what to wear and when to show up, I'd be burning shit down. I 100% know it. So I needed to create a container where I could show up fully as myself.
I love that so much, because I was that person that was burning myself down, trying to follow a narrative that didn't resonate to my truth and to my authentic higher self. And it was something that was ingrained, it was encoded, it was, you know, from day one, the programming. And, you know, we forget that like the first 7 years of your life on earth is you're strictly in programming, you're strictly in theta brainwaves, you're programming. So everything that happens in those times sets you up for your teen years and your adulthood if you're not aware, if you're not self-aware of how the programming happens and works. And we're not even taught how it happens. Nobody teaches us in school how programming our brain works, how energy works, how any of that works. We are just like told to do this, expect this. This is what you want to achieve. This is what you're supposed to do. And then you get stuck following these narratives and following this, you know, going through the motions, suppressing your true self. And for me, I just see somebody, when I look at you and I hear you, it's like the highest representation of going for inner validation, because you have that glow. There's a glow that comes with when you are at peace with yourself, and when you have the relationship with yourself that we are meant to have. Because I feel like that's actually like where that God energy, you know, really comes in, and where that heavenly like beauty, like that's what he wants. He wants us to have that connection with ourselves, because it reflects everywhere else in our life. It really does. And when you talk about the mirroring and the different relationships, it's just a conversation that's not normally had. And I think it needs to become normal.
I agree. Like the mirror consciousness for me is so fun. Like I dig mirror consciousness and being able to mirror back to someone what they're actually saying. And there's a couple of responses when spiritual bypassing is present, and it's usually projection and deflection. And what happens to the mirror then is the mirror becomes the center focus for that person, because they don't want to look at themselves. And so I've gotten really, really good at recognizing when people are projecting or deflecting onto me, and I don't accept it. So then there usually becomes some sort of conflict of like, you're doing this to me, or this isn't. And I'm like, I am literally doing nothing but mirroring exactly what you're showing me. And it certainly doesn't mean I'm a perfect mirror. It just means that I am very, very good, because of my history and my skill set, at recognizing when someone is trying to distort the mirror. And that is where the rubber meets the road. You're either going to shift or you're not. And the reality is there's a lot of people who don't want to shift. They say they want to shift, but the work required to shift, they don't want to put in. And, you know, it's like really quick for me. Like we all go through these levels where we release different people from our lives. And at first it was really hard for me, because I thought these people were going to be around for a really long time, and then they would fall away, and like the mirror was just too much, and what I was saying or my being public was just too much for them. And at first I would try and like pull them in, and now I'm like, bye boy, like I don't have time for that. Like if it aligns and we're in alignment, I'll keep doing it. The second it's not in alignment anymore, I'm very, very quick now to assess, yep, we're not in alignment. That's cool. I'm going to release you to do your thing. And it doesn't even have to be a conversation. It can be an energetic release. There are times when you have to have a conversation, you know, in business or things like that. But sometimes we do overcomplicate that by wanting to be heard. For me now, it's really a quick assessment. Are we in alignment? Can we stay in alignment? Or am I going to have to fight energetically to work with you? And I'm not here to fight. I'm here to work with people, and I'm here to help elevate them. And a lot of times, like when in the personal coaching container, what I have the privilege of doing is mirroring back, because I can speak to people's higher selves. I can mirror back the aspects of their highest form that they aren't seeing clearly right now. And there is not a person on this planet who doesn't love seeing themselves in their highest form, regardless of where they're at. So that is like, my one-to-one containers are like fucking amazing for me, because I get to show them the aspects of themselves that they aren't seeing, that they literally are micro movements away from. And it's usually just these simple, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's these simple choices. And sometimes those simple choices look like a relationship leaves, a job leaves, you move. They're not easy, but the steps are so micro, so simple. And we want, sometimes as humans, we kind of like a little bit of drama. We kind of like to stir things up so that we don't have to have simple, actionable steps. And in my experience, these one-to-one containers are for people who are just, they move at an accelerated pace. They need that mirror. They can see it, but there's some fog in their way. There's a little bit of disintegration that they're needing a mirror that can see them in their highest form. And for me, like, there is nothing more sacred that I get to do here. And like, sometimes I will admit, I'll do this with people who aren't my paid clients. And like I said, everyone loves to see it, but when they aren't vested personally, when they aren't really committed to that, sometimes it becomes interesting. That little dramatic element of it gets really interesting. So I love doing it. I live for that. And being able to see people in their highest form and on their highest timeline is some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. That sometimes I get a little bit like, oh, they don't want it. Why don't they want it? And a little bit sad, and a little bit like, if you could see what I could see, like, it's 2 steps. It's 2 steps that way. You can do it. It's so hard sometimes to let them choose, but you have to.
I feel you on that. As a sacred space holder myself, who's gifted to see a lot of similar things, it's hard to hold that space at times, but this hopefully can be inspiring for a lot of people to, like, most people, like, yeah, of course, do we have narcissists and sociopaths and things like that? Yeah, but a smaller percentage than we think it is. And most of the time it's traits that actually can be healed and whatnot, and we use it as an excuse. But most people wake up every day wanting to be a better person, wanting to find more peace in themselves, wanting to figure out how to do that. And we're all just broken people raising broken people. So we got to figure out how to do that at this time. And it is not an easy thing. Leslie, something you were bringing up is a little bit about boundaries. What does that look like? And how is that a bridge into even more self-love and worth with yourself? You were talking about really being able to just now vibe in so quickly on whether or not something's in alignment. For our listeners, will you share a little bit about what that experience is of what's in alignment? How do you know you're not? And how do you start practicing honing in on that? And why boundaries are important?
Yeah. So
Thanks.
my opinion on boundaries are they're the simplest, most authentic way to show up for yourself. The majority of us have been trained that our boundaries are selfish or self-serving, or we need to give more. This is codependency, and most religions live and thrive off of usurping other people's authority and power through codependency. So all of us have some codependent tendencies, and all of us as a whole are pretty uncomfortable looking at that, but it's just reality. And if we can accept that there are these codependent parts of ourselves and desire to please other people, and we start to bring awareness to it, shifts do not need to be complicated. It is, your brain is so amazing. When you just bring a little bit of awareness, your brain creates an entirely new pattern to follow. And you bring awareness to around the fact that this one particular relationship that you have is filled with codependency, and you don't understand how it got there. Your brain starts to look for a new way to deal with it. And then you bring a little bit more awareness as this pathway is gaining traction, and a little bit more, and it always looks like boundaries. And I have 5 children. I also have 4 businesses. I have the potential to be spread so thin that I could be nothing. And this is where my boundaries come in. And it can be hard when your kids are little because they are made to sustain off of you for a while. So that part is hard, but the boundary of what does it look like to show up fully for myself in this moment? What are the small things that I need to focus on in this moment? And if you have a key person in your life who is requiring you to do more for them than you are doing for yourself, and they are not under 5, you have a serious thing you need to look at. And you have a challenge that you have to work through. And some of those are able to be worked through, and a good majority of them are not. And that is just the reality of it. So I have read a book called Power versus Force. And in that, it talks about a vibrational bandwidth. And the majority of people are under 200. And under 200 is shame, fear, grief, apathy. Once you hit 200, that's where courage comes in. And this is why I'm a firm believer that entrepreneurship is the doorway to enlightenment. Once you hit courage, right above that is neutrality. And I believe that when you create from neutrality, which is right around 250, 225, now keep in mind, 97% of the population lives below 200. So once you hit courage, then you have access to neutrality. Once you're in neutrality, you can start to travel up and down the vibrational bandwidth at will. You have ultimate power. I always think of like that Darth Vader movie where he's like, ultimate power. Anyways, so
You really do. I'm jamming with you. I love it. Yes, yes, yes. That's how it is. And all of a sudden you're the master of your domain.
So when you're in that neutrality, then you start to see situations come in that ask for your attention or ask for you to adjust your time, and you can assess really quickly. Is this the right time to look at that? Is this a distraction? When a lot of our relationships are codependent, we will have someone in there that likes to create chaos to distract us from what we are doing. This is an opportunity for you to set a boundary. Sometimes with the chaos creating element, that boundary then creates more chaos. Stand firm. Stand firm. While you're learning how to have boundaries, you're going to go too far and you're going to go backwards. It's okay. Like it's a game. It's a game. You're just learning. Be gracious with yourself, but recognize, and this is the thing, you start to recognize when you gave up your power to someone else, and you can feel it in your body. Your body tells you. We've been trained to ignore our body responses. You want to know where anxiety comes from? Giving up your power. If you have an excessive amount of anxiety, you are not standing firm in the things that are in your highest good. You may have someone in your life who is challenging your power. Now, most manipulation is from the subconscious. So they don't always recognize they're doing that. I don't say any of that to vilify anyone. I'm just saying when you start to set your boundaries, people will challenge you. Whether it's your parents, your kids, your friends, your partner, they'll challenge you. And if you can just say, I used to have just a simple saying, this is what I can do right now. I understand that you don't feel like it's enough for you. This is all I have. So I can't give any more than what I have. So I can help you find a different route to do that. I can direct, if it's a business associate, I can direct you to someone else to help you with that. Or I can schedule you for 2 weeks out. Whatever your boundary is in that moment. If you have like a set line, say it's your partner. I need you to do this, this, and this for me. Well, I already have this on my schedule. The kids have this planned. I really don't have time to do that. So it's going to have to go in the, you're going to deal with it later bucket. And if they're frustrated, then you just have to say, I'm sorry that you're frustrated. That's something I'm going to have to defer back to you. I don't have time for it. And they're going to have to then look at why they're responding in a negative way to your boundary. In abusive relationships, this is another conversation because then it becomes about an attack. And I'm not necessarily speaking on that level. I have experienced it. I do have tools to help people through that, but that's a whole nother level. So if you're physically afraid of someone's response, if you're being spiritually or financially or emotionally manipulated, it's not that simple. And you're going to need outside intervention. Don't do it alone. I made that mistake. It is It is possible to do it alone, but that is where a lot of people get hurt. So that is an extenuating circumstance that I don't want to skip over. In a somewhat codependent, non-abusive relationship, it's usually just they need awareness around the fact that you're maxed. And this is where in my very abusive, unhealthy relationship, I started to recognize that my needs weren't important. And I was seeing a counselor and I was like, I need to be able to do this. It will make me feel better. And she's like, why aren't you doing it? And I was like, well, he doesn't want me to. He says it interferes with us. And she's like, if someone loves you, they want you to do what's best for them. That doesn't mean that their first response is always going to be great. But when you start to use your voice and clear and be able to speak your truth and what's good for you, this takes some practice. Sometimes your voice is going to explode and sometimes your voice is going to be too timid, but it's really just starting to recognize inside what is best for me. It's not about all the little people you're raising, not about the business. It's not about these other associates. It's about what is best for me. Is it best for me to do this right now? And really, if we as a whole society started to really do what was in each of our highest good, can you imagine what that world would look like?
I say that all the time. I just can't wait to the day, the lifetime where we get to see people just plugging into their own magical power and having their beautiful boundaries and being self-sufficient. And I think we are meant to discover that as small children, and that's connected to our sexuality and all the things that got hijacked. However, we're rebuilding that. And like you said, it's a small percentage that are plugging in from the start, that are happening right now at the top, but more and more are. And as we travel through moons and seasons and times, more and more opportunity to plug into that is happening. And I'm so grateful that you're speaking about this and sharing about this and guiding people through how to do this, because it is beautiful and potent and sacred work. And I'm a true believer that this whole thing we're going through right now, this whole revolution, all just starts with your inner evolution. And we really are all one. When you're feeling alone, it really is all one, alone. All one, and you are connected and you are plugged in, but it's about calling back these pieces of yourself. And we can do that through sacred boundaries. And it's so important to give ourselves permission to say no, especially, when we don't want to say yes.
For sure. And anytime that you say yes to something that's not a fuck yes, you've given away your power. And that there is no judgment in that. I still do it on occasion, but I feel it in my body and I take a note and I go, okay, next time I'm going to do that differently. And I create for myself set lines. If I know that this is a continual place where I give up my power, I try to set myself up to succeed. And I try and role play what that looks like, which is manifestation. The mental role playing is manifestation. How do I want that to go differently next time? Obviously, there's outside variables that will affect it. But if you can role play, what is this conversation going to look like? What is this going to look like? How do I show up more for myself here? And every time it gets a little bit smoother and a little bit more fluid, and you speak your voice then with more grace and ease and less explosive. One of the things when I'm clearing with people that I really work on around the throat is that when they're speaking their truth, that it's not a violent thing, that it's not been cooped up so long that it explodes, that it's more of a soft, gentle, graceful thing. And one of my favorite aspects about being so public about my own story is that I get random messages or calls from people, and they will say, I don't feel like I could say this to anyone else but you, but I know that you will understand it. And they can say things like, I'm not sure I want to be married anymore. I'm not sure I want to be monogamous. I have this kink that I think my partner will think is weird. I have this element of myself that I've kept boxed up, that by you being your true authentic self has made me feel like I could say to another person on this planet. That is where change starts to happen. And so even though there are times when being so public is a little cringy for me, not really, but we all have those moments. Those moments bring me back to, yep, people may think I'm wild. People may think I'm out there. People may think whatever they think, but I'm authentic to myself in every moment. And that allows everyone in my space to be authentic with me.
And you just standing there, shining the light, being true to yourself, gives others permission to turn their lights on, or their kinks, or whatever it might be that helps their souls, feel a little
Yeah.
more free and enjoy this amazing experience here in Earth School that we get through our sensuality and all of our senses. And that's like the biggest thing. The more conscious you get, the more heady you get, then you start to bring it down, like you're saying, into the subtle realms, into the energies, actually being like, wow, this fucking rose is a miracle. And the vibration that it's operating at, and the way it smells, and how it was just like amazingly created, here for us to see and touch and taste and feel and sense. Like there's just so many things that we haven't had the privilege to learn yet. And that's what we try to discover here on Unschooled. We try to learn new things, and if we can, unlearn certain things that aren't serving us anymore. And one of the last things that I would love for you to touch on before we close out today is you said something that I find so magical in choosing responses. And I feel like when you get to respond to something, or when you are at a level where you're saying I respond to something, that means you're conscious. And when you're reacting, or something's, coming out as a reaction, a lot of times we're not being super conscious. And it doesn't matter how far you are on your path. If you're sitting in traffic and one day someone cuts you off and you're like, oh, wow, like maybe the angels had my back, like, phew, that was close. Or the next day someone cuts you off and you're like, I hate your guts. Like, why did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. There's an opportunity to look within and see, okay, why am I reacting a certain way? Why am I not actually choosing how I want to show up to this thing? What's going on within me? And so I just love, you were talking so much about all that energy. And I'm wondering if you have any tidbits for people as they're learning how to harness their energy and these things coming up within them.
For sure. So what some people call triggers, I call out of alignment. So anytime I'm out of alignment, I kind of fucking dig it. Like if I'm raging, I'm like, takes a lot to get me riled anymore. Why am I riled right now? And I really start to kind of dissect and look back at that. And the more awareness you bring to your reactions, because that's what you're referring to, a reaction is that automatic gut, I'm fucking pissed, like, fuck you. And I still have those 100%, and I am not ashamed of them, but I really like to look at them. I'm like, and it's the people in your direct house that see that one. They see it more than anybody. They're like, what the fuck is her problem? I'm like, man, fuck you kids, and it's all good. It's all good because I can really look at it and be like, yeah, that was lame. Mom's tired. She hadn't eaten all day. She took that out on you. You're still a solid human. I'm a human too. So forgive me for that. And I'll work on it, and then I actually work on it. You can't just say, oh yeah, I dropped the ball there and then not actually work on it. And so when they pop up, just have some curiosity, less judgment for yourself and more curiosity. Where did that come from? Like what facilitated that? It takes a lot to push me out of alignment anymore. And it usually has to do with me not getting enough sleep or doing too much plant medicine, things like that. And, but one of the things I love about my house, and I put this energetic grid around my house, and I have teenagers and their friends are over a lot, and I try and keep it real high vibe, and it's a very, very safe place. So they all feel safe there and they tend to want to be there. They still pop off and do stupid things. But in my house, when you're reactive, we respond to someone else's reactions. Like, okay, I hear you. I see you're reactive. Do you need space, or can we process why you're reacting to me? Teenage boys tend to be filled with rage because their testosterone level is so high. I'm super conscious of that. Done 4 of them, get it fully. And sometimes they just need to go beat some punching bag, play soccer, play football, get it out however they need to. But we always come back to it. Like, where did that come from? And do the same thing with yourself. Like, really ask yourself. Don't just like push it off to the side. Oh, mom has road rage. I do. I drive like a wild woman. But but why am I so angry in those moments? And where is that coming from? And what is doing that? Like sometimes I watch crime shows just to trigger myself because I want to see what triggers me. It's weird, but I kind of dig it. Like I'm kind of like a geek for learning all those things.
I love that. That's like, yeah, that's like porn type energy to me in a lot of ways, because I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, I'm triggered again. Like, wow, like it takes a lot these days. And what is this serving? And sometimes, like I use the example, if you're walking down the street and you see someone kick a puppy, like that should trigger something in you. And sometimes it is important for us to have these reactions, to act on them, to help bring more balance. So there is a sacredness to it.
Yeah. And really, it's all just the practice of bringing into awareness. All of this is what vibrational bandwidth are you at? What's your awareness around that? Where do you want to be? And it's not about the striving. It's just recognizing where you are and accepting it. And then what are the micro movements I can do to shift it? So if I lose my shit, if I go off on somebody, why did I do that? Like, where did that come from? What triggered that? What sort of dis-ease settled in me that brought that up? And how do I feel about that repeating itself? Because if I'm not going to bring awareness to it, it's going to keep coming. So it's going to get more and more explosive, kind of similarly to how I stayed in that relationship for a really long time, getting smacked. It just got harder and harder because I really wanted to look at it. So anytime you let that reaction just slide by the wayside and don't spend some time bringing awareness to it, this is all inner work. This is not like you need to go to a counselor and drop hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can, but you can do this inner work if you're honest with yourself. And that's where having an outside mirror becomes beneficial, because they'll call you out. Someone with a high intuition who can see your highest form is going to call you out when you're wanting to hide from yourself. So it is the inner work. And then when do I need someone to call me out, and who is that person I choose?
I love that so much. It's the art of sacred space holding. It's holding that sacred space in order for that to be able to happen. Because I know, which luckily I had Mandy who stepped in, and I've been working with her now for like 4 years. And when I finally had that, that's when things really accelerated. And it went from me meeting her and like, Mandy, oh my God, I need to talk this out, to finally like us checking in every, 2 weeks. Like, oh my, guess what? I feel so good because, that self-awareness, that diving into the self-awareness, and it's the journey of self-awareness, not the destination. Mm-hmm. I feel like, we get we've been kind of like programmed to get to a destination, like that rush to get to this destination. What is that destination? And we miss out on that journey, and that's where the gifts are. It's that present moment, that each day is that gift. So it's the process, forgiving yourself, getting better each time, showing up. And I really believe it's people like you and being able to hold this sacred space that is going to help that tidal wave of positive energy change. It's who knows where seeds are planted or who needs to hear this. And that's why I was so excited when I was watching your Instagram, because I was just like, oh, these are just, it resonated so deeply. And I know so many people that are going through things. I'm like, this is what they need to hear, this inspiration. They need that positive energy. And when you're radiating at the level that you are, it's hard to not pick up that positive energy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It may trigger those. And when it's triggering somebody, it's because it's a red flag saying, look at me. But some people are not ready or don't know how to look at themselves like that without it. So it is, I feel like, that's why what you do for work and you girls do for the coaching, I'm starting to work with people now because I finally got into that place in my healing journey, but I couldn't do it without doing the work itself. So mm-hmm. I feel like you guys have done the work, and that's why we need you. We need the people that have done the work to share. We need people to share. We need people to share that it's possible, that it can be done, and to give that hope and to show what is possible, what is capable, mm-hmm. and to cheer one another on with it. So thank you so much, because you're so inspirational. And as a mom, we have addiction and we live in active recovery, and I worry about my kids. I worry about that next generation. So I'm so hyper aware of this whole parenting. And I feel like my children have helped me do my inner child work. Like, they have been the gift that key to unlocking that work for me. When I hear you talk about how that relationship, it's such a beautiful topic that there's not a lot of conversation around. And I'm like, there's so many parents struggling with, trying to understand things, and so many societal pressures. Motherhood and like just parent guilt is such a real, and it's just getting harder and building with each stressful year that we seem to be facing. So I'm so glad to have you sharing your story, because it inspires me as a mom. So thank you.
Glad. So I agree with you on the child thing being a really intimate mirror, because you want so much greatness for them that you are willing to do more than you thought possible. And one of the things that I have so enjoyed about my children is viewing my alternate timelines with them, because I have really awesome relationships with all of my kids. And I've always been so grateful for that, because I've spent the last, few years wondering, like, man, wow, that's a lot for them to overcome. I'm feeling some tension there. And so when I was able to forgive myself and recognize that they had chosen me and they had chosen their dad for this experience for their own purpose, and really release that tie to their outcome, and recognize that some of these things I nailed and some of these things I failed, and that's okay. Then I could start to really open up and see so many timelines where I've had with them. Like, my oldest son is my dad in one lifetime, and they're my siblings in this other lifetime. And I'm getting to see, one of them is my twin. And, it's just been so enlightening, because there's a little bit of bleed over from all those alternate timelines that we have together. And so recognizing that and being like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, because for the last 5 years, I have really been more of like sibling energy with them, because I was spending so much time figuring my own crap out. And their graciousness towards me, and like my oldest and I, he was definitely more like dad energy, because he was very present with the kids. And I had felt a lot of guilt about that later, because I felt like he missed some of his childhood. He was like, Mom, it was all as it should be. And I just remember thinking, you guys are just like fucking epic humans. Like, I'm so privileged that I got to be your mom in this life, when in reality, I feel like they have been my greatest teachers,
I love that so much, because it's one of those things where I feel like society has us so busy that we forget the simplicity and like enjoying those moments. And you talk about the seasons, like this season. And I, as a mom of 4, was struggling, because I was like, why am I not enjoying this season? You know what I mean? Is this going to last forever? Because I feel like I'm failing ethically. And learning to forgive myself and release the shame and guilt that I was holding on from past experiences. And I didn't even realize about these other timelines until just recently. So I'm newly diving into this, and I'm like, wow, this is mind-blowing. And Mandy has helped me see these certain shifts, and it's been able to, like, just the experience alone with each one of my children and our relationship and the evolution of it, and watching them grow, as you said, it's amazing feeling and privilege. And it's like, it's so beautiful. And you know what? Society does not support us in enjoying it. They rush us through it and make us so we're not around for it. And I'm battling the boundaries, trying to teach my kids boundaries, as you guys can obviously tell. I've got some under 5 in the house, and this boundary issue, I got books upon books about healthy boundaries. And I'm like, this is in my face. This is what we all need to learn, especially mama's got to practice it so they can learn it.
Yeah. Well,
so
and if you want to talk about precondition for codependency, why don't you grow something in your womb and then have it come out? Like, if you're not codependent, you're not human. Like, literally, you have to really have some strong assets in place to not have already been preconditioned for that. And the rest, it just all works itself out. I do want to touch on one thing that you shared, Lexi, about being worried about the addiction history in your family. And one thing I'd like to focus on right here is that when you have a fear of something happening or repeating itself, you're actually projecting that energy out onto a future timeline and creating it. So if you can acknowledge, I have fear around this because this happened in the past, but I accept that I've shifted and I forgive myself and I love myself. And I know that whatever my children choose to create or whatever anybody outside of me chooses to create will be for our highest good. You clear out that projection onto your future timeline. A lot of us, and me included, spent a lot of time reconfirming my fears, speaking things onto my future timeline that didn't need to be there. And you have more control over it than you realize. So if you can just accept that fear and just know that it comes from a history that is expired, that's expired from your timeline.
Yes, I love that. We talk a lot about, breaking these multi-generational kind of curses and chains. And I feel like this has been part of my journey, is getting to, I've been able to identify and see some handed down things and realize that it gets to stop here, and we get to change that narrative, and we get to make that happen. And it's that experience. And that's one of the things I've been feeling called to share publicly, is my experience and journey. Thank you for the extra love right now, girlfriend. Through it, because I know so many moms out there that are like, oh my God, that's my same fear. And they're like, what do we do? What do we do? And I really feel like there needs to be a space created around this. I have a dream of like goddesses in recovery, something, because I feel like there's so many people who have gotten stuck, and it was like, preconditioned programming that's led us right into addiction. It just kind of like, it was so easy. If you really look at the timeline, like there's Dope Stick Nation, and it goes over the timeline of, the drug epidemic and everything of opiates. It was really like created by like our society. It made it happen. And we have these beautiful people that are stuck in these cycles that don't know how to heal, because guess what? If they knew, they would have healed. They need the support. They need the help. They need to find that love within themselves. And it's people sharing their stories, their experiences, their knowledge, and holding that sacred space where that's going to happen. And we're going to hopefully see this massive wave, I believe, of healing, and have all of these warriors sharing their stories of their experience in healing. And I feel like it starts right here with you sharing yours.
Thank you.
This has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy and your story with us, Leslie. Will you one more time just share a little bit about what you do, and then how people can get a hold of you or follow you or work with you if they feel inspired to, if you're open to that at this time, of course.
Yes, of course. So I have individual coaching through, it's just leslielyon.com. And they can catch me there, or of course on Instagram. That's Lazriel Vertis. I know it's hard, but it's there. And then I also own a virtual assistant sourcing company, and we source hand-chosen VAs from Latin America. And we have found that the Latin American community has been super marginalized, and they have been taken advantage in the virtual assistant sourcing process. And so we advocate not only for our clients, but also for our VAs. Most sourcing companies take a portion of their income, and we don't do that. We advocate for the full wages to go to them by charging a placement fee with our clients. And then we hand choose them, and we help them spin them up if that's something they need help with. And I have had so much fun in that business, because not only do I get to help my entrepreneurial people, but I also get to help a community of people that are near and dear to my heart. And then, of course, my individual coaching, and you can just catch me for free on social media, and I share a ton on there, and I give away a lot of things on there because of my deep love for humans in general.
Beautiful. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Lexi. Thank you, Mila. Thank you, Leslie. And thank you to all of our listeners. This is Unschooled. If you've made it this far, please give us a like, a share, a follow. We would be honored to continue this journey with you. Take care.